$1. Every single part, the motherboard, the CPU, the RAM, the GPU, the storage, the power supply, every component in this entire PC costs $1 or less. And before you say that is impossible, let me stop you right there because I am sitting in front of it right now and it just ran 3 actual games. So yeah, it is possible. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how painful, how frustrating, and how genuinely insane the process of pulling it off actually is. Stick around because this one goes places you will not see coming. Here are the rules and they matter a lot. $1 per component maximum. Not $1 for the whole build combined. $1 for each individual part. Every single component gets its own $1 budget and cannot exceed it. Shipping costs do not count toward the limit because if they did, the project would be dead before the first package ever arrived. Used parts are fully allowed. Broken parts are fully allowed. Bulk lots, where you buy multiple units and split the total cost per unit, are allowed. And repairs are completely fair game as long as you can get the component working again without the repair itself pushing the cost over the limit. Those rules sound manageable, written out like that, but in practice they turn a normal PC build into something closer to a survival exercise. There is no room for wasted money, no room for bad luck, and no margin for error at any point in the process. Every dollar spent is a gamble, and every component could arrive completely dead. That is the game. Let us play it. Starting with the motherboard, and this is where the project almost collapses before it even begins. A $1 motherboard in working condition does not exist in any practical sense. The demand for budget boards never fully disappears, and sellers know it. Even the oldest, most basic, most outdated boards on eBay almost always list for at least $3 to $5 on the low end. After searching through listing after listing with nothing fitting the budget, a seller finally appears offering 5 broken motherboards as a single lot for $5 total. 5 boards, $5, which works out to exactly $1 each. The obvious problem is that the listing clearly states every single one of them is non-functional. Buying 5 broken motherboards and hoping at least one of them can be brought back to life is the only option at this price point. If none of them work, everything stops here. The first board out of the lot is an H81 Mini ITX model that is absolutely packed with dust and debris, with the damage extending into the CPU socket area, which is never a reassuring sight. After a thorough cleaning, it gets powered on and produces absolutely nothing in response. No indicator lights, no fan movement, complete silence from the moment power is applied. Boards that fail this way are usually completely dead at the component level with no practical path to repair. Moving on. The second board is a G31M, old enough to qualify as vintage hardware at this point. When power goes in, the CPU fan actually spins, which is at least a signal that electricity is flowing through the board somewhere. But there is 0 display output, no keyboard detection, and no boot, regardless of which CPU gets dropped in or how many times the configuration gets changed. Spinning fan, but no real life. The third board comes out of the box and behaves almost identically to the first one. Total silence, 0 response, nothing from the moment the power cable connects. The fourth board is an H110 that looks visually cleaner than anything else in the lot and raises hopes for a moment. But the result is the same. No display signal, no boot sequence, no response to any troubleshooting attempt. 4 boards tested, 4 boards dead, 1 board remaining. The fifth one is another H81, and from the surface it actually looks better than most of the others in the lot. But looking into the CPU socket reveals the real problem immediately. Multiple pins are bent in multiple different directions, and this is a serious issue. In an LGA platform, the socket pins live on the motherboard itself, and a bent pin means attempting to install a CPU will cause damage to both the processor and the board. Before a single component can go anywhere near this board, every bent pin has to go back into its correct position. Working with a fine tool, moving 1 pin at a time, applying careful controlled pressure in the right direction, one mistake and a pin breaks off entirely, which means the board is finished and the last dollar of the motherboard budget is gone. But it works. Every pin goes back into alignment well enough to attempt a proper test. CPU installed, RAM seated, everything connected, power button pressed. Display signal appears on screen. The fifth board is alive. 1 working motherboard out of 5 purchased as part of a $5 lot, which means this board cost exactly $1. The CPU search centers on the LGA 1150 socket that the H81 board uses. This socket covers Intel 4th and 5th generation processors and includes Pentium and Celeron options alongside the Core lineup, which matters because the budget processors in this family tend to appear at lower price points on the used market. Searching eBay specifically filtered to $1 or under for socket 1150 processors actually returns some results which feels like more than this budget deserves. The first purchase is an Intel Pentium G1840 listed by the seller as untested. Untested is the seller's way of saying the chip has not been verified, and the risk of it being dead transfers entirely to the buyer. The lower price reflects that. The chip arrives, gets installed into the working board, and when power is applied, there's nothing on screen. Checking the processor temperature by hand after a few seconds confirms what the blank screen already suggested. Completely cold. No heat means no current is running through the chip at all. The G1840 is dead, and that dollar is gone. Before that first chip arrived, a second CPU had already been ordered quietly because trusting a single untested processor at $1 felt like betting everything on a coin flip. That second chip is an Intel Pentium G3 the same LGI 1150 socket, also purchased for $1 from a different seller. The contact pads underneath look clean and undamaged despite some cosmetic scratching on the top surface. It goes into the socket, the board powers on, and the BIOS screen loads immediately with no errors. The G3 is alive, and the build has a functioning processor. $2 spent on CPUs to get one working chip, and the working chip cost $1. RAM is next, and the H81 board requires DDR3 memory, which turns out to be one of the more cooperative parts of this entire project. DDR3 has been replaced by DDR4 and DDR5 across essentially all modern systems, and the result is a consistent supply of used sticks available on the secondhand market. Finding it for $1 is still not easy, but after enough searching, a listing appears for two 2GB sticks pulled from a recycled office system. Both sticks for $1 total. The math works out to 50 cents per stick, which fits the budget with room to spare. Both sticks arrive, get installed, and the system detects all 4GB without a single complaint. For a build where almost every component involves some kind of compromise or gamble, 4GB of DDR3 RAM working perfectly for $1 is a genuine clean win. Storage comes from a 320GB mechanical hard drive listed for $1 and showing over 9,000 hours of operational time on its health report. 9,000 hours is a meaningful amount of wear on a spinning drive, and the realistic expectation going in is that it could stop functioning at any point without warning. The only requirement for this build is that it survives long enough to hold Windows and a small number of games. It passes the initial health check without flagging any critical errors. Windows installs onto it without problems. It keeps working throughout the rest of the build process. For $1 and the specific needs of this project, it does exactly what is asked of it. The GPU is where the $1 rule becomes the most difficult constraint in the entire build. Graphics cards almost never appear at this price point, regardless of how old or basic the card is. The demand for cheap GPUs never fully goes away, and sellers price accordingly. Every eBay search filtered to $1 or under for any GPU comes back empty. The solution comes through a direct approach to a private seller who agrees to sell the bare PCB of a graphics card, completely stripped of its cooler and any accompanying accessories, for exactly $1. The seller believes the card still functions, but has no way to confirm it without a cooler attached. With no other options available, the risk gets accepted. Running any GPU without cooling attached destroys it in seconds under any real load. A spare cooler from an old NVIDIA GeForce GT 1030 happens to line up with the mounting points on the bare PCB closely enough to function as a replacement. It gets secured with thermal paste applied, and the GPU goes from an unusable bare board to a cooled, installable card. The GPU itself cost $1. The cooler cost nothing. The thermal paste is the one material in this build that probably costs more than the component it is protecting. CPU cooling uses a stock Intel cooler pulled from an older boxed processor. These get swapped out for aftermarket solutions so frequently that they appear everywhere on the secondhand market for almost nothing. This one costs well under $1 and mounts directly to the LGA 1150 socket with no modifications. The power supply has no visible brand, no model information, and no listed wattage rating anywhere on the unit. It costs $1.80, making it the one component that runs slightly over the $1 target. But after exhausting every other option, this is the only PSU available at anywhere close to this price point. The fan spins when connected to power. That is the full extent of the confidence available going into the build. It gets installed and manages to hold together through every test without incident. The case is a cardboard box modified by hand. Cutouts get made for airflow. An opening gets cut for the motherboard I/O panel. Space gets created for the PSU and the cables that connect everything together. Hot glue holds the motherboard bracket in position. 2 screws secure the power supply. A hole gets drilled for the power button connection. The final result looks exactly like what it is. It costs nothing. Testing starts with Tomb Raider, which pushes the GPU to its absolute limit even at the lowest graphics settings available. The card runs at full utilization throughout entire gameplay sessions, and the frame rate sits around 30 frames per second consistently. It is technically playable, but not enjoyable. Minecraft, at minimum chunk render distance, reaches close to 200 frames per second, but increasing the render distance to a more normal setting drops the frame rate to around 30, and the CPU cannot keep it stable from there. Left 4 Dead 2 is the best result of the 3 games tested, It runs at a consistent 55 frames per second, even during the most demanding sequences with lots of enemies on screen at once. Smooth, stable, and genuinely playable on hardware that together costs less than a bottle of water at an airport. Installing and loading games on a 9,000-hour mechanical hard drive is an experience that tests patience at every step. Everything takes longer than it should. Every load screen runs longer than expected. Every file transfer crawls. It works, but it makes you feel every one of those 9,000 hours each time you wait for something to happen. Total spend across every component, excluding shipping, comes to approximately $8. $1 for the motherboard, $1 for the CPU that actually worked, $1 for the RAM, $1 for the storage, $1 for the GPU, under $1 for the CPU cooler, just under $2 for the power supply, nothing for the case. For less than the cost of a fast food meal, this machine runs Windows, connects to the internet, and plays real games right now. It is slow, it is loud, it is held together with hot glue inside a cardboard box, and it has no business working as well as it does. But it works, and sometimes that is entirely the point.